Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Courtroom Insider. Today is August 6th, 2025. I'm Nate Eaton. Glad you are with us tonight, where we are going to take a closer look at the Shasta Groene case. I guess the Joseph Duncan case. He's the suspect, and this is just an incredible, heartbreaking, horrific story all around. A new book has come out from Shasta's perspective. And we're going to talk with the author who worked closely with Shasta on all of this. Took 4 years to get this book done. And we'll have him in just a minute. But for those of you that are unfamiliar with the case, I want to go back. It is a case that rocked the country. It rocked us here in Idaho. It's just one that has you asking so many questions why. And so we're going to delve into that tonight. If you have any questions, please send them to us, questions@eastidahonews.com. We'll try to get to as many of those as we can. Also, a little bit later, we'll have Doug Hart. Remember Doug Hart, the FBI guy who testified at the Daybell trials? I asked him about his involvement in the Groene case, the Edward Duncan case back in the mid-2000s. And I'll play his soundbite a little bit later about his involvement. But this case goes back to May 16th, 2005. Authorities discovered the bodies of Brenda Groene. She was 40, her boyfriend, Mark McKenzie, who was 37, and her son, Slade Groene, who was 13. This was at their home along Lake Coeur d'Alene, in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Two of Brenda's other children, Dylan, who was 9, and Shasta, who was 8, were missing. An Amber Alert was issued. Searchers combed the area for the missing children, while authorities investigated the deaths at the home as homicides. Autopsies determined the cause of death to be blunt trauma to the head, and the victims had been bound. 47 days later, a month and a half later, on July 2nd, 2005, Shasta was seen at Denny's, a restaurant in Coeur d'Alene, in the company of an unknown man. A waitress, a manager, and 2 customers at the restaurant recognized the girl from media reports. They surreptitiously called the police and positioned themselves so that the man could not leave the restaurant. Police officers arrived and arrested him. His name was Edward Duncan. And Shasta identified herself to the waitress at the restaurant and authorities that she was indeed the missing girl and was taken to a medical center for treatment and reunited with her father. Now, a few years ago, that waitress at the Denny's restaurant spoke about that moment on an investigation discovery special. Here's what she said.
The restaurant sits really, really uniquely, strategically right off the highway. I went in for a regular shift, and I had been at work for probably about 4 hours. Coming back from break, I see a man and what looks to be a child in my section. It was about 1:30, 1:45-ish in the morning. So it was a little strange, but I walked over to say hello to my customers. When I got to the table, everything felt off. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and something was gnawing at my subconscious. The little girl, she was filthy. You could tell her hair wasn't very clean. She was in clothes that absolutely looked filthy. I asked, can I get you something to drink? She would not respond at all. And he wouldn't take his eyes off of her, which is just odd.
That was the waitress at the Denny's. Can you imagine if you're working and in walks this little girl who's missing? Authorities really hoped and thought that because Shasta was alive, her little brother might be alive as well, Dylan. Police asked for tips, specifically concerning sightings of a stolen red Jeep Cherokee with Missouri license plates that Duncan had been driving at the time of his arrest. They discovered that he had rented a car in Minnesota and never returned it. A gas station employee in Kellogg, Idaho, about 40 miles east of Coeur d'Alene, recognized the vehicle as one that had stopped at her gas station hours before Duncan was arrested. The employee suspected the girl wandering around the station might have been Shasta, but did not confront her as nothing appeared out of the ordinary. The employee and her manager notified authorities after reviewing surveillance camera footage and identified Duncan and Shasta in the video, but Dylan was not in that video. 2 days later, they found a makeshift campsite in the Lolo National Forest near St. Regis, Montana. This was on July 4th, 20 years ago. The remains were sent to the FBI lab in Quantico, Virginia for DNA testing, and they confirmed that they were indeed those of Dylan. And during the trial, it emerged that Duncan had shot Dylan at point-blank range by holding a sawed-off 12-gauge shotgun to his head. Just horrific. What we know about these murders comes from Shasta. She's the only living person that witnessed them. She told police that Duncan killed her mom, older brother, and her mother's fiance, then kidnapped Shasta and her brother and drove them both away in that stolen Jeep. She said that her mother came into Dylan's and her room and woke them up. Her mother said, quote, "Someone is in the house." Then they went into the living room where she saw Duncan wearing black gloves and holding a gun. Duncan tied her mother's hands with nylon zip ties and did the same to her mother's fiance and her brother Slade. Shasta and Dylan were removed from the house and placed outside on the lawn. While waiting for her brother, she heard multiple thumping sounds from inside the house, just horrific. She then saw her injured older brother staggering away from the entrance of the house. He then bludgeoned the three to death and proceeded to place Shasta and Dylan in the car. He took the children to other locations where he reportedly and repeatedly raped and tortured them for 6 weeks. Duncan told her how he had beaten her family members to death with a hammer. Shasta also told investigators how Dylan was murdered. Duncan insisted the death was an accident. Initially, Shasta was standing on the other side of Duncan's Jeep when she heard a loud boom. She then ran to the other side of the Jeep and saw Dylan lying on the ground screaming. Duncan was digging through a clear plastic box looking for beer when a shotgun that was kept went off, hitting Dylan in the stomach. Shasta said that when she saw Dylan put the shotgun to Dylan's head and pull the trigger, it failed to fire. Dylan begged Duncan not to kill him. Duncan reloaded the gun, put it back to the boy's head, and killed him. He died instantly. According to Shasta, Duncan started to cry and told her that he only killed him to put him out of his misery. Shasta reported that Duncan nearly killed her days after killing Dylan. She said that he gave her the choice to be killed either by strangulation or with a gun. Shasta chose the former, and Duncan proceeded to wrap a rope around her neck and tightly pull it, causing her to start suffocating. However, she summoned enough breath to beg Duncan to stop using his nickname Jet, and he immediately did. He then asked if she would like to meet his mother, to which she responded yes, and the two drove back to Coeur d'Alene and stopped at the Denny's, where Shasta was rescued. Once Duncan was arrested, it was discovered that he was tied to other missing children cases. He was implicated as a possible suspect in several crimes that occurred between 1994 and 1997 when he was on parole, and between 2000 and 2005 when he was free from prison. Although he was cleared as a suspect in some cases, authorities in California and Washington had enough evidence to believe he committed several unsolved murders in their jurisdictions. I'm not going to go through all of that, but what I did not know or needed to be reminded, he ultimately, I should say before I'll back up, he served 11 consecutive, he was sentenced to serve 11 consecutive life sentences without parole for the 1997 murder of Anthony Martinez in California. He had also confessed to but was not charged for the 1996 murder of two girls, Sammy Jo White and Carmen Cubias in Seattle. At the time of the attack on the Groene, he was on the run from a child molestation case in Minnesota. During his incarceration, they tied him to those other cases, as I mentioned, and also he was serving time in Idaho for killing Shasta's family and kidnapping her and her brother, and was given 3 death sentences and 3 life sentences, so he was sentenced to death. He died in March of 2021 at the age of 58 of terminal brain cancer. They discovered during all of this that he had a very violent history that began when he was a teenager. He was 15 years old. He raped a 9-year-old boy at gunpoint. The following year, he was arrested for driving a stolen car. He was sentenced as a juvenile and sent to a boys' ranch in Tacoma, where the Associated Press reports that he told a therapist that he had bound and sexually assaulted 6 boys. He also told the therapist that he'd estimated that he had raped 13 younger boys by the time he was 16. In 1980, he stole several guns from a neighbor, abducted a 14-year-old boy, raped him at gunpoint. He was sentenced to serve 20 years in prison for the crime, but was released after 14. While out on parole, he's known to live in several cases, including Seattle. And then in 1996, he was arrested for marijuana use and released on parole several weeks later. And on and on and on about all these arrests in California and Missouri and North Dakota. And then in March, just a few months before this, he was charged, before the Shasta case, he was charged for molesting 2 boys at a playground in Minnesota. And then bail was set at $15,000. A Fargo businessman whom Duncan had become acquainted helped him post bail, but Duncan skipped bail and disappeared. On June 1st, a federal warrant was issued for his arrest. So he was on the run when this horrible stuff happened to Shasta and her family. Doug Hart was, there's so much more too that I don't want to go into, that you can read about, that's been written about, and docuseries, I believe, have been done on it. But Doug Hart with the FBI worked this case, and I had a chance to ask him about this about a year ago. Actually, it's been 2 years now. No, it was about a year ago. Sorry, a year ago in June. I sat down with Doug Hart in his office. He's since retired from the FBI. He now works in Canyon County as the chief deputy for the sheriff's office. Here's what he said about this case. One of the other cases that you have done, worked on, is when 2 little kids disappeared in, was it 2005? Somewhere around there, mid-2000s. Mm-hmm. Give us the backstory for those people that aren't familiar with the case.
That was a case involving a subject named Joseph Duncan, who was a serial killer of children, and he kidnapped 2 children and then murdered stepfather, mother, and older brother. And so Shasta and Dylan were the 2 that they were 8 and 9 years old at the time, and they were kidnapped, and it was just a massive investigation. And so
and where was it?
Coeur d'Alene, Idaho.
Coeur d'Alene, northern Idaho.
And then he took the children into Montana.
And how did he know the family?
No connection to them whatsoever. None. He was driving to Seattle to visit his mother, and going westbound on I-90, and saw those 2 children out in a little kiddie swimming pool, and that was all it took for him. And he went on to Seattle, eventually came back and couldn't get those kids out of his mind, and so he went in and murdered their family and kidnapped them.
So he actually went to Seattle for the visit, and then came back.
Yes.
So where were you at your point in your career?
So I was in north central Idaho in a smaller office in Lewiston, but we were supervised out of Coeur d'Alene. So when that crime was committed, it was all hands on deck for the duration, basically. And that one was shorter. That happened in May. And Shasta was recovered alive 4th of July weekend. Now, the ensuing investigation took a number of years, right, and multiple trials, both at the federal and state levels, death penalty case. But that one was very intense, from day one up until when she was recovered, and then subsequently finding the remains of her brother and the campsites and other things that went into that investigation. And again, I played a role in that, as did dozens of other people.
Right. So when a child goes missing, I learned this in the Daybell case, actually, the FBI steps in.
We don't step in to take over, because
Right.
you don't know whether you have, like in this case with that we've been discussing with the Daybells, is you don't know day one if there's going to be a prosecution, or if it's going to be a federal prosecution, or if it's going to be a state prosecution. You don't predetermine those outcomes. And so what we found is that when children go missing, that there are very frequently, they cross state lines, which brings a federal nexus to it, but we don't want to wait until we've verified a federal nexus. So the response now is that when you have a child go missing, and in that one, I mean, it was clear, we found, the mother, brother, and stepfather were bound and murdered, so we knew it wasn't like they had wandered off. We knew we had something really terrible. And so the FBI comes in, but we worked that one with the Kootenai County Sheriff's Office. The command post was in the Sheriff's Office, and we just are the best partners we can be. We have certain resources federally that our state and local, city, county, tribal partners don't have, and they have certain things they can do that they're better at. And so we partner with them and try to bring the resources that we have, the expertise we have in missing child cases to bear, to try to get to the best resolution as quickly as possible.
How did you find Joseph Duncan?
We didn't. So he had taken those children to a very remote campsite in the mountains of Montana, and murdered Shasta's brother there. For whatever reason, he brought her back. And so it was a waitress from Denny's who recognized her and called the police, and they took him into custody. So,
A waitress in Coeur d'Alene.
Mm-hmm.
They just happened to know who she was.
Yeah, I mean, it was widely publicized.
Right.
There were posters of the kids everywhere. But yeah, she recognized her and did the right thing, and so that was how she was found. It wasn't because we had done something brilliant and learned who he was. He had no association of any kind with that family. None. No, not a single phone call, nothing. And so, and this is back, we're dealing with a lot different technology
Right.
in the early 2000s than we are in 2019.
Right, no
2000.
smartphones.
Right.
And the fact, it's just unbelievable that he did come back to Coeur d'Alene, to northern Idaho. Mm-hmm. And as you mentioned, he was sentenced to death, and he died on death row. No, he wasn't executed. He actually died, I think, of cancer.
Died of a brain tumor.
Oh, brain tumor,
Yeah.
a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 2 high-profile cases in your career. Probably more. Am I missing any?
There's a few others, but the Joseph Duncan case was very helpful to me in the role that I played in the Daybell case. When you have these cases with massive numbers of manpower and different agencies, and coordinating all the paperwork and reports and tasks, so those were valuable experiences that I think helped in the Daybell case to bring that experience with me and share with the others who were involved in the case.
For both of those cases, when you started working on them, did you think they would be as high profile or as big as they were? Like, could you tell with Daybell, like, this is going to be big, or with Shasta Groene, okay, this is going to be big?
You kind of get that point when the media starts showing up and staying with it. Mm-hmm. So, in a sense, yes, when you see that the media has developed an interest in the case, and that they seem to be staying with it, and so that was, for both of those, there was a lot of of media attention with those cases, and so in the sense you know that something big is happening, but your focus is really, I mean, this is the first time I've spoken with anybody from the media, really, since the Daybell case concluded. So our focus isn't on the media or what the media is doing. Our focus is on just working the case,
right,
and trying to figure it out. And these are, both the Duncan case and this one were both very, very difficult. But we also saw just tremendous investigative work done by the detectives and the analysts and the support folks that what they were able to track down and piece together and then ultimately present to a jury. That's what ultimately wins the day. Is that level of detail, that attention to detail, and just not compromising on anything. And so I think in both of those cases, the investigators that were assigned, adhered to that standard of work, and that's what brings a complex case to a successful conclusion.
Right.
So difficult things to deal with, but again, you feel good about being able to contribute in some way, shape, or form to holding those people accountable and to serving the cause of justice in cases where it matters most. I mean, you're, as an investigator, I think when you're dealing with homicides, that's, and I've investigated or participated in several homicide investigations. It doesn't get much more serious than that, because the consequences of a mistake can be pretty significant.
Right.
And so you've got to bring your A game, and that's what everybody did, certainly in the Daybell case and in the Duncan case, and so they're significant, sort of personally and professionally, because of what's at stake if you get it wrong.
So how do you unwind and not let this mess with you mentally? I mean, I see you're a runner, biker. I mean,
Run, yeah.
pretty physically fit. I mean, is that one of your outlets?
I think each person is different, and I think that at some point, does that dam break? I don't know. I haven't reached that point. For me, there is when you raise your hand and you swear an oath to well and faithfully execute the duties of your office, meaning as an agent or a sheriff's deputy or a detective or a police officer, for me personally, that's very, very meaningful. And I think those are the things that give you the strength to persevere through a difficult case like this. A lot is riding on it, and if not me, then who? If not now, then when? And so, to me, that's what it isn't. It isn't the other stuff. It's the weight of responsibility that a law enforcement officer feels, and I know I can speak for everybody at Rexburg and Fremont County and all the agencies that participated in this case, including the prosecutors, that weight of responsibility was a very real thing. It was felt by all, and everybody, this mattered to us. And so it's different. Like, I think from where you sit, you see what we did and what we had to be exposed to, and it's shocking. Mm-hmm. It's not that it isn't shocking to us, but we have to carry it. We have to finish this. We have to carry it through.
Right.
That's to me, that's the armor that we have to help us get through this kind of stuff.
Right.
If you don't have that armor, then I think maybe you're in trouble.
Yeah.
But for me, it's the responsibility that I volunteered when I entered this profession to carry, and that is a source of strength.
Now, Shasta has done a few interviews over the years about her ordeal, not many. She's not one that's in front of the cameras a lot, and I don't necessarily blame her. I mean, could you imagine going through that, and then where do you go after this? And it's just such a horrible case. And we talk here in a minute with the author of this book about that. But before we get to that, I wanted to read you a column that Shasta recently wrote for Oprah Daily, Oprah.com. And this was about the book that's coming out, that is out now. It's called Out of the Woods, A Girl, a Killer, and a Lifelong Struggle to Find the Way Home. Shasta wrote this with Gregg Olsen, who is a New York Times bestselling author. He's written several true crime books in the past. But I think this is good to hear directly from Shasta. By the way, I did request for her to come on here, and I haven't heard back. And if she's watching or you know of her, she's always welcome here. Would love to hear her story of overcoming this horrific thing. And she, has had struggles throughout the years, and she admits that. But for now, I want to read you what she said to Oprah.com, Oprah Daily. This was back in last month. 20 years ago this month, I returned to the Montana woods to help police find my brother Dylan's remains. Dylan was 9 and I was 8 when our family was murdered, and we were held captive in a remote campsite in the Lolo National Forest. Dylan was my best friend, maybe my only friend. He died. I lived. He never came home. I did. I grew up, married, and started a family. Things Dylan never got to do. I survived a serial killer. He didn't. From that day when I helped police search for evidence to now, I've been, quote, that girl, the one who got away, the one people talked about, loved, pitied, and later, the one who disappointed them with my addictions, my arrests, my failed attempts at recovery. They felt that I didn't live up to the second chance I was given when recognized at a Denny's, leading to my rescue after a 7-week ordeal. I want to be real here. I have to be. That's why I'm writing this now. Every single day after the monster took us, he found a new way to torture our minds and bodies. He was the worst kind of evil that anyone could imagine. If I really want to be real, and I think you need to know this, no matter what he did to me, it pales next to what he did to my brother. Because Dylan is dead, and I'm not. I have lived with that, or tried to, for years. Finally, I hope I have come to terms with it. As much as I can, at least, because recovery after severe trauma is ongoing. I want people to know that being rescued didn't end the trauma of what happened to me and my brother. Trauma is a lasting stain, no matter how hard you try to heal, despite the best intentions of others. Many cared, but most adults shied away from the full story. It was, quote, too painful, they said. Try living it. I wanted to shout back at them. For years, it felt like screaming into the void. I yearned to share my story, but no one could truly listen. It was too much, too terrible to hear. For a time, I even thought that containing my trauma would foster growth, but silence felt like a lie. Sharing bits of truth with a therapist or some other interested adult, then moving on, always left me feeling incomplete. Only complete honesty, stopping myself from caring what others thought, brought me power. Talking with journalist Gregg Olsen, author of Out of the Woods, A Girl, a Killer, and a Lifelong Struggle to Find the Way Home, was transformative. He was committed to telling my whole story, not just sensationalized snippets, showing my whole life, before and after. Everything. Previously, people who did bother to look at my life after saw only my problems. This time we explored the why. Self-reflection helped me understand my experiences and myself better. I want other survivors to know they're not alone, that feeling broken is okay, and that healing isn't about feeling better. It's about trying to keep going even when everything around you seems to tell you to give up. That's enough. Healing isn't beautiful. It's one of the hardest things you'll ever do, but with the pain lies power, the knowledge that you're moving forward. Survivors should not be ashamed. They're still here, surviving, making them absolute badasses. I have 5 sons now. They're young, but already asking questions. I wrestle with what to share, knowing that one day they might read news accounts or Out of the Woods. But I won't lie to them. I want them to know their mother's story, to understand why I am the way I am, my parenting style, my strictness, why they couldn't walk to the park alone, why I love them so fiercely. I hope they find strength in my journey. Like all trauma survivors, I am more than what happened to me. 20 years later, I'm strong, resilient, and I feel I can survive anything. I envision myself on a battlefield wearing my trauma as armor. I stared death in the face. Nothing can break me now. If you are out there and you are suffering in silence, don't hold it inside. Let it out. Make those closest to you listen, even when they say they can't take it. We can't stop the pain without ending the silence. Shasta Groene's words from Oprah Daily. And such a powerful essay there. And now I want to play you the interview that I did with Gregg Olsen. Again, the name of the book, Out of the Woods, A Girl, a Killer, and a Lifelong Struggle to Find the Way Home. The story of Shasta Groene. All right, Greg, the name of the book is Out of the Woods, A Girl, a Killer, and a Lifelong Struggle to Find the Way Home. Can you start off by telling us how you met Shasta, what got you interested in her story?
At the time, I was writing a book about the Sunshine Mine Fire, and it was called The Deep Dark. I was deep into my interviews, and I was going back and forth across the Panhandle from here in Seattle area to through Coeur d'Alene and up to the mining district. And when it happened, when the kidnapping happened and the billboards went up, and then when she was rescued, I just was like everybody else. I thought, wow, I'm so happy she's alive. I'm so sad about Dylan and her family, but it stuck with me forever. So 20 years later, or 15 years later, I wrote to Shasta and said, how come there was never a book about your story? Do you want to tell your story? And she had talked a little bit about working with another author that didn't go too well for her. But she thought about it and she said, you're the one to write it. And we started talking, and it's been, that was like pre-pandemic. So lots of phone interviews and 3 or 4 face-to-face interviews at her home in Nampa.
Wow, that's quite a process. So you've really been working on it for 4 years, 4 or 5 years now?
Yeah, and here's the thing. I'm just like everybody that knows that story, how much it meant to all of us that she was rescued and that she was found. So much, that we had hoped was a happy ending. And then when you look at her life and you've seen her in the news over the years, you know that there was no happy ending right there.
Right. I read an account, I believe a news story, that when she first met with you, was it a several-hour conversation? She was trying to maybe vet you or figure out if she wanted to go forward with the project?
I mean, she was really invested in telling the story. She just wanted to make sure that the story would be told with the complete truth, that I would do what other people wouldn't, which is even her family or the therapist, she felt, never really listened to her. And her idea was, that's part of the problem here. People want to help, they want to understand, but it's too terrible for them to actually hear what happened. And so the vetting was, would I be able to tell the full story? And I did.
Why do you think people weren't willing to listen? You would think anyone would be like, well, yeah, I'll hear her out. I want to hear her story. But what was it about it? Is it the length of time since it happened? Is it that it is so gruesome? What do you think the reasoning is for that?
It's gruesome's a good word, but it is so painful for the listener when you hear what went on in the woods and before the kidnapping in her life, and certainly what happened after all of this. It's hard to hear. People don't want to hear it all. And even when I'm interviewing her and talking to her, there were things that I don't want to know, that I didn't ask about, because even I, as much as I'd heard, I didn't want to hear it all. But she was very forthcoming. She was, she's not, shy about telling people what happened, but we're the problem. We don't listen. And that's the message, I think, really of the book is that we got to listen to these people because it helps them and it also helps you to understand.
What were some of the most difficult things to write about?
I think for me, as I worked through the book, what really struck me and what was the most painful was how long lasting trauma can be, that it could be a forever thing. And in my mind, I write a little bit about it at the end. I felt that maybe therapy and, you know, all the tools that are available to help people, maybe that was really going to cure all the hurt. And I realize now that it doesn't, that it doesn't go away. And that's the part that really sticks with me is that, we see people, Nate, on the news. They're on the news. We see these tragic crimes. We see the Idaho 4. We see whatever, but it doesn't go away. Now we go away as listeners or consumers of that kind of content, but those people will live with it for the rest of their lives. And that's not easy.
Right. I would imagine that in your interviews with Shasta, as you're compiling the book, that she told you things that have not been publicly revealed before.
Absolutely. She told, yeah, well, no holds barred. She told everything. And what was great about her at age 8 was she did interviews with the police, had the transcripts and all that. She is right on the money on what her recollections were. And her recall on detail was amazing. I mean, I think about myself at 8, like, what could I remember? But of course, I didn't have something like that happen to me where, your parents are murdered in front of you, your brother's killed in front of you, a monster uh, does these unspeakable things to you. I mean, I haven't had that.
Mhm.
So I don't know what it's like to really, have that kind of thing lodged in your memory, but she did. And she was an amazing 8-year-old, and she's an amazing 28-year-old.
I had just gotten into news when I was a brand new young reporter in Idaho Falls when this story happened. And so I, of course, am aware of a lot of the details, but it's amazing to me that a lot of people from here in Idaho, when you mention Shasta's name, they don't know who she is. Maybe because they've moved here or they weren't following the story at the time. Can you give just kind of a brief recap as far as her story, what happened, back in the early 2000s when she was abducted?
Right. It was in 2005, in Wolf Lodge, which is just outside of Coeur d'Alene. A man came into their home and killed her mother, her stepfather, and her teenage brother. And he took Shasta, who was age 8, and Dylan, age 9, and disappeared. No one knew where they were for about 48 days is how long they were gone. When Shasta resurfaced, she resurfaced at a Denny's restaurant. A waitress there and other people recognized her because there was a huge search for both those kids. Where are Shasta and Dylan? We got to find them. Billboards everywhere. It was a big, big story. One of the biggest stories ever, I think. And to have her found at that Denny's restaurant was a big moment for all of us in the Pacific Northwest, and indeed everybody, like I think in the country. We just were so glad this little girl was found. What we didn't know was what had happened to her, fully what happened to her during those 48 days. We didn't know any of that. There were trials. I don't even mention the guy's name because here's the funny thing, Nate. When I do interviews or talk to people that have read the book, no one ever asks about him. And I think that's really interesting. No one ever says his name. They all want to know about her and how she's doing. So that's kind of remarkable. And I think that's sort of for the reader and for those who follow the story, I think that's the heart of the whole thing is we all love this little 8-year-old. We see the video of her in the Conoco in Kellogg when she's got the man with her. There's just a little kid standing there. And if you have a sister or if you have a child or a grandchild or whatever, you look at that kid and that pulls and tugs at your heart in a way that very few things do because she's standing there. She's scared. She's a captive and he's got her. And it's
Right.
something that is very tough to take.
Right. How did she, once she was found and, the court proceedings happened with the suspect, the man that did this, uh, how did she at such a young age without a family? What happened to her then? A lot of people have wondered what has she been doing over all these years?
Right. I mean, she's been struggling. There's no doubt about it. I mean, at age, 12, she was sent off to one of those camps in Utah, rehabilitation teenage camps, a concentration camp, I think, for kids that parents can't handle, don't know what to do with. So she was there because she was doing a lot of things. She was doing drugs. She was acting out in other ways that, a manifestation of the trauma that could not be resolved was going on. So she had from age 8 to really age 16, 18, there were arrests, there were other problems in her life. She'd pop back into the news. We'd all see her. So all this outpouring of love and attention, in some cases morphed into, well, what's wrong with her? Well, why can't she get it together? She was saved. She was given a chance. And I think all of us just, did not know what goes on behind all of the tragedy, and that's what the book's about.
Right. Name of the book again is Out of the Woods. Gregg, one of the things that I believe that one of the things that impressed me about the book is you're kind of going beyond the headlines, beyond some of the clickbait stuff that we might see that attracts us all to it, to get to the substance of the matter. How did she deal with the media during all of this over the past 2 decades?
Right. The media is a friend and a foe for sure. You know that. I mean, the media is there when the good things happen, but they're really after the bad things. If she got arrested, or if her trailer burned down, there are things that where she would pop in and out of the news. She felt that after a time, people made assumptions about her. She was what she says. She did an essay for Oprah Daily, and it says, "I don't want to be that girl." That girl everybody recognizes or knows in her community. I don't want to be the person that they feel sorry for. I want to be me. But it's hard for that to happen because of the lens we all have. We look at her and go, oh my God, look at all that stuff that happened to her. And she just wants to be a normal person.
Yeah. I remember April of 2023, I was covering a murder trial in Boise at the courthouse and waiting in line with a bunch of people from the public. We got inside and a lady comes up to me and she says, Shasta Groene's downstairs. And word starts to spread as if she's a celebrity. And she was there doing some routine stuff that you might do at a courthouse. It wasn't like she was in another courtroom or anything, but it was interesting to me that in these people's eyes, she's a celebrity or she's a famous person. And is she ever able to get past that? I mean, as much as she might not want it, how do you get past that?
Yeah. I mean, I think she's reconciled that, at least in Idaho, that's who she is.
Mm-hmm.
What she does, what she's not, and she's not a professional victim. People have said, oh, she's victim here, victim that. She's not that. She is a girl that was 8, that had something awful happen to her, and she's trying to figure out how to be you or me. That's all she wants to be. But just like you say, in the courthouse, people whisper, they know who she is. When she goes to Walmart or wherever, there's going to people will whisper behind her back. She could hear them, that's Shasta. And that's a really tough thing to deal with. So the thing about the media and all of that is attention is a good thing, certainly when we are trying to do good. But these people that have gone through this sort of remarkable experience, that have lived to tell their story or walk among us when they shouldn't, those people are wanting more than anything to be just like you.
Yeah.
A stranger.
Right. Did she ever express any interest in talking with the man that did these horrible things to her and her family before he died?
Yeah, in her mind, yeah, in her, she talked about, in her a kind of a fantasy of going to confront him, and tell him, you don't own my life. You don't own, you're not my whole story. And I hate you, or alternately, she'd think maybe I should go see him and forgive him, all of that stuff. But thankfully, she never had to do that, because I don't think that would have done anything for her. It would have only made him happy.
Mm. Yeah, good point. Gregg, you are well known for writing, best-selling books, and you've written several other books. How did you get into this genre? How did you decide, I want to write books, and how do you make them so successful?
Here's the deal on that. I wrote true crime because that's what I read as a young person. I would read Anne Rule, Jack Olsen, who's not related to me. I'd read those books, those narrative nonfiction books about people that were, caught up in something really bad. And I was interested in all that. That's what I wanted. I always tell people, like, if I was really into gardening, we'd be talking about my gardening book right now because it was what I liked. It was what I wanted to know about. And it wasn't about, I feel really lucky. I want to say this, Nate. I was lucky that I came in at a time when true crime was really big.
Mm.
It was huge, back in the 80s and 90s. Uh, Ann Rule and Jack Olsen, and Jack, wrote about your famous case out in Spokane, um, the serial rapist, and they wrote about the victims and the impact on the families, and other people weren't doing that. So I took a page out of that. I decided, well, if I'm going to write this in this genre, I want to write books that, yes, I want people to read them. I want them to buy them, but I want there to be some kind of value in what I'm doing. This is before, like you used the phrase, clickbait. This is before when we were thinking about likes, on Facebook or whatever. I wanted to do something because I wanted my life to be about something. And by telling their story, I feel like maybe I have done a little bit of good.
Why do you think people like reading about true crime and watching docuseries and movies and podcasts? What is it that draws us to it?
There are some people who, and I think it's a very small percentage of my readership, that just want to hear a gruesome, nasty story. I think that's a very small segment, and they get a lot of attention. The serial killer groupies, that kind of a thing. I think for my readers and people that consume a lot of the podcasts, they are mostly women, and they listen to them because they feel that whoever is doing whatever they're doing in that story, they can't understand it. They don't understand why someone would hurt a baby or kill a husband or shoot down the neighbor. They don't get that. And they just are digging in their own minds to try to find out why. And that, I think, is what drives everybody to this kind of content, the why.
As you've done all these books and spoken with so many victims over the years, is there a common theme or characteristic that they all have?
That's a great question. This is the first book I have ever done where the person that I'm writing about, the main person, the victim, is alive.
Mm.
All of the other books that you read about, whether Idaho 4 or whatever, it's people talking about those people saying, oh, she lit up the room when she came in and everybody wanted to be her, that kind of a content. People say, this is really somebody telling me her story. And her story, and it's not a varnished idea of who she was and who she is. It's her telling me the story. And that's what's different about this book. When you read this book, you're going to really get an insider's view of the impact of trauma to somebody who made it out.
Interesting. Yeah. So did you have to take kind of a different approach? Because instead of speaking with relatives and friends, you're speaking with the girl, the woman.
Right. I had a researcher. She helped me, Robin Lass, and she was great. We did a lot of legwork, but I thought to myself, this isn't a whodunit. We already know who did it. This isn't a cop story. She was found by a random waitress, right? So the story in true crime usually follows one of those paths, or maybe the prosecutor. This is a story that I wanted her to tell. So while I do have all of the transcripts and we talked to some people about Shasta, it's really her perspective that the book is all about. And I think that's really interesting. It's something I don't think people have done or read before.
Yeah. Do you have any other projects down the line that you can tell us about?
I'm glad you asked because I have a book next spring called From the River's Edge, and it's about the Donna Perry case from Spokane.
And remind us about that one.
That's a transgender serial killer. Cold case that, 3 women were found murdered and their bodies left by the Spokane River. It went cold for a long, long time until DNA testing revealed that the person that had committed the crime was in a woman's prison in Texas, and she used to be a guy.
Mm. And that comes out in the spring.
Yeah, so I'm back to Spokane. All roads lead back to you guys.
Right. Well, that's not bad. Maybe we can get you some positive news to write about. The other question I had for you is, do you foresee a future where Shasta maybe writes her own story, writes her own book, or was this kind of the close of a chapter of this part of her life where she's this is my story. This is it moving forward.
I think she does want to move forward, but that doesn't mean she doesn't want to, ignore her own story. I think what she would like to do more than anything is use what happened to her in some way to help other people. She's talked a lot about she wants to, do some sort of work for women who re-enter society after either trauma or prison or whatever. So there is in that 28-year-old this idea that maybe, telling her story in a comprehensive way will shine a light not only on trauma, but give her access and also in some way, we don't know what, to help other people. That's what she wants to do.
How do you decide which stories to go after, Greg? There's so many true crime stories. Like which is there something about certain ones that attract you?
Well, a lot of the whole thing is I want to write something no one's written about before.
Mm.
You know, to me, the very best story is a story that, is fully adjudicated. So there's no question about who did it or that someone's in prison or whatever. But what I'm really looking for is I want to bring something to my reader that is worth paying for. It's original content. It's not a rehash of, a trial that they've read about in the paper or online. So that's always for me. I'm always looking for that story that we really don't know much about.
Awesome. The name of the book is Out of the Woods, A Girl, a Killer, and a Lifelong Struggle to Find the Way Home. It's available now. You can order it on Amazon or other bookstores. Gregg Olsen worked closely with Shasta on this story. Greg, is there anything that you want to add?
No, I mean, not really. I want to encourage people to give it a read. It's a tough, tough read. It is, but it's real. And I think that we're part of the problem if we can't take that in for our understanding about really what happens to people. You can say, oh, I was held captive in the woods by a madman for 48 days, but it's way more than that. The whole process of dealing with severe trauma, I want people to get in there and understand that maybe that person next to them, that's going through something, will always go through that. And we got to find a way to either love them, listen to them, and make sure that we understand that it's not over.
And help us understand what trauma is. I mean, many of us, we hear that phrase and we're like, well, what does that mean? And I would imagine as you get into this book, you see what it's like for her experiencing it, and we can say, oh, that's what trauma is.
That's exactly right. And trauma can be many things to other people. There's no doubt about that. But there is a thread there. The thread is our assumption that people always get better, that through therapy and whatever else we give them, that they're going to get better. But they will be able to function. Many of them can, but they haven't forgotten. And maybe sometimes even years later, they want to bring it out again. And I think if you love somebody who's gone through something like this, I think it's our duty to hear them out again.
And again, my thanks to Gregg Olsen for writing this book. I look forward to reading the whole thing. I have not read the whole thing yet, but it is on the way in the mail. And when I get it, I know it's going to be one of those books that once I start, I can't stop. And my kids and my wife, Erica, they've left town for a week. They've gone back east. I originally was supposed to be covering the Kohberger trial, and so I'm here in Idaho. And then when that got canceled, I said, well, maybe I can try to come with you. But Erica's like, you know what? You can stay back and finish all your projects. I have so many projects working on in the coming days, so I'll be working on those sort of things. And anyway, I'm here, so I'm a bachelor, and you might see more of me, I guess. Actually, you will see more of me because we have another episode coming up tomorrow. I'll tell you about that in a minute, but before we get there, I want to thank newspapers.com, our sponsor. If you are into this story, the Shasta Groene story, the Edward Duncan story, go to newspapers.com and search their names, and you will find stories of this horrible ordeal of the case as it unfolded. And they don't have just this case. They have any other true crime story that you want to read about. It's on there. And newspapers.com will be at CrimeCon, which I'm so excited to see them. They have been such a supporter of us long before they were sponsoring Courtroom Insider. And CrimeCon just today dropped the schedule. You can go on and see when things are happening. In fact, I want to pull it up. It looks like there's a lot of fun panels, and you can still register, by the way, for CrimeCon if you want. Then get a 10% off by using the promo code Eaton. That's my name, Eaton. I will be speaking, here's just a few of the sessions. Luigi Mangione, Manifesto Manhunt and Moral Divide, Active Shooter Responses, What Would You Do? Have a Seat with Chris Hansen. We've got Bone Valley. Love the podcast. If you haven't heard it, Leo Schofield's Road to Exoneration. By the way, I'm going to be there. Erica's going to be there, and I'm going to try to record stuff with a lot of these people that I can bring you here on Courtroom Insider. And then 4 o'clock on Friday, the Daybell case, Inside the Investigation and the Family Torn Apart. I will be on stage with Colby Ryan and Detective Ray Hermosillo. So if you're going to be at CrimeCon, that will be in the ballroom. Would love to have you come and see us. And we're doing a meet and greet after. There's also behind the scenes of interview with a killer, Ice-T, an evening with Ice-T behind the SVU badge. John Ramsey, the murder of John Ramsey, Where We Are Now, Groomed by Their God, Inside the FLDS and the Machinery of Cult Recruitment. Mike King will be there. Nancy Grace. The Delphi case, there's all sorts of really cool stuff. Susan Smith, the prosecution of Susan Smith. I remember that story. Dateline, Josh Mankiewicz and Blaine Alexander. Let me find the other case. Where is it? Okay, I know it's happening, you guys, because I'm there. It's on Saturday with me and Marcia Clark. I don't know the time, but I'm going to find it for you right now. Marcia Clark, there we go. It is, 2 o'clock on Saturday. Trial by Ambush with Marcia Clark, a tale of murder, injustice, and the truth about the case of Barbara Graham. Nate Eaton, Marcia Clark, and she's also doing a meet and greet. So anyway, so much fun, CrimeCon. Go check it out. Tomorrow, we're back here. Yes, and I cannot wait for you to hear this interview. I haven't done it yet. It's with Brad Bradley. He's the brother of Amy Bradley, the series of the #1 show on Netflix right now. And she disappeared while on a cruise. We're going to talk about what Netflix left out. We're going to talk about any new developments on the case. He's from Richmond, Chesterfield, right where I lived, right where my family's going right now. And it's going to be a conversation where it's going to be great. If you haven't seen the show on Netflix, watch it. And then what happened to Amy Bradley. And then we will be back here tomorrow night discussing it. And if you have questions that you want me to ask Brad, send them to questions@eastidahonews.com. And that way we can get them to him and we'll talk about that tomorrow night. Everybody, thank you so much for watching. My thanks to Gregg Olsen again for writing the book. And thank you for being here on Courtroom Insider. And I'm Nate Eaton, and we'll see you tomorrow.